Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Natalia Moczulska, and this is the news. 3 topics dominated the NATO Summit in Washington, D.C., including strengthening allied deterrence and defense, aid for Ukraine, and cooperation with Indo-Pacific partners. The alliance continues to adapt command structures and the process of generating forces to execute new regional defense plans. The most important of the decisions made concern support for Ukraine. Let's take a look at the key takeaways of the summit. The NATO summit in Washington, D.C. confirmed the alliance's full support for Ukraine, which is fighting the Russian invasion. Russia remains the greatest and immediate threat to Allied security.
And we're working with our NATO allies to ensure Ukraine is flying F-16s this summer. And we show the world that we stand with Ukraine now and in the future.
It is worth remembering that after the Russian aggression against Ukraine, it was Poland that was the first to support the country and speak about the need to stop Russia. When Vladimir Putin started the aggression against Ukraine, he assumed a division or even a conflict within NATO. Something like that did not happen. This aid is flowing and will continue to flow, and it is a direct realization of our national interest. NATO heads of state have agreed that a training center for Ukrainian soldiers is to be established in Bydgoszcz. This will be the implementation of the Ukrainian army into NATO procedures, bringing it closer to the military structures of the North Atlantic Alliance. And on the other hand, it will be the sharing of war experience by Ukrainian experts or Ukrainian military officers. The growing Pacific competition with China was also an important theme of the Washington summit. At the summit, we asked about joint Belarusian Chinese military exercises taking place in Belarus.
The Chinese exercise together with the Belarusian forces in Belarus is part of a pattern. It just confirms how authoritarian regimes are aligning more and more, and also how China is coming closer to NATO in Europe, in Africa, in the Arctic, and elsewhere. So this fits into the pattern we have seen, also with a closer alignment between China and Russia.
In addition, NATO's eastern flank is to be strengthened, including the responsiveness of the PAC's forces with the collective defense of alliance members and the previously developed NATO regional defense plans implemented. On defense spending, despite the stipulations of previous summits, not all members spent 2% of GDP on defense.
This alliance is stronger than ever. 23 members are now spending 2% of their GDP on defence. But in light of the grave threats to our security, we must go further.
So far, Poland spends more than 4% of GDP on defense. The question is for how long, because as we revealed, the new government planned cuts of more than 57 billion zloty between 2025 and 2028. I am a little surprised that Mr. Tusk did not support Polish President Duda and did not say that the 3% should be the benchmark. It was reported in Washington that the U.S. installation in Redzikowo is already operational and has entered the NATO anti-aircraft and anti-missile system. Its construction in Poland was started when Antoni Macierewicz was a defense minister. We managed to overturn the decision of Mr. Donald Tusk, who blocked Redzikowo, and since 2016 we have rebuilt this system. It actually gives us and all of Europe security guarantees against a nuclear attack from the Russian Federation. Because, as President Andrzej Duda said 8 years ago at the NATO summit in Warsaw, we must jointly bring anyone who even for a moment faces the temptation to apply the law of force to understand instantly that it is simply not profitable. Because it was in Warsaw, 2 years after the end of the reset from the first Tusk government with Russia, that decisions were made to deploy NATO forces on the eastern flank of the pact, in Poland and the Baltic states. Radosław Jankiewicz, TV Republika. Yesterday's closing conference of the NATO Summit was announced by the U.S. media and the White House as the most important test to date for President Biden's ability to continue in his role for another 4 years. Such an introduction of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was certainly not expected at the NATO Summit in Washington. Joe Biden introduced him as President Putin, and although Zelensky tried to turn everything into a joke, the distaste remained. And this wasn't the only mistake Biden made that evening. The host of the NATO summit, Joe Biden, was probably hoping for high praise from his wife, Jill.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts.
But not this time. This is how the American president officially introduced the Ukrainian leader.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
The face of Volodymyr Zelensky when he heard
President Putin
probably says it all.
I'm better.
Biden quickly improved. Zelensky still tried to salvage the situation by convincing that he was stronger than Putin, but the fateful impression remained.
Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
And just when everyone thought the grand evening could not end any worse, during the press conference, Joe Biden wanted to say a few warm words about his vice president, Kamala Harris. His thoughts, however, were with someone else entirely.
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president.
This is how Donald Trump responded to Joe Biden on social media. Great job, Joe. Joe Biden clearly has a problem. So do the Democrats.
Voters are fearful. I hear a lot of anxiety. Depending on the household, it's not so much about Joe Biden, and it's more about a possibility of no Joe Biden.
Especially since this is not the first alarm bell. During a recent trip to Normandy to mark the 80th anniversary of the landing of Allied troops, Biden's behavior raised alarm bells. At the G7 summit, Biden was rescued from his predicament by Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Here, no one rushed to his help anymore. Joe Biden is increasingly isolated, even in the White House. Every day works against Joe Biden and his colleagues, White House spokesmen or even secretaries, who are already slowly at a loss as to how to explain the president's successive mistakes. After losing a debate with Donald Trump, Biden assured that the best is yet to come for Democrats.
I'll beat Donald Trump. I will beat him again in 2020. By the way, we're going to do it again in 2024.
More and more sponsors no longer want to support Biden's campaign, fearing it is a road to nowhere. Marcin Szewczak, TV Republika. A tragic accident occurred today in Gdynia during a training flight of an M346 Bielik aircraft. The machine hit the tarmac of a military airport and burst into flames. The plane's pilot did not survive. This is another accident and death of a soldier in the Polish army. That is how a training exercise ahead of the Navy Aviation Brigade celebration show, scheduled for tomorrow, ended tragically. The incident occurred at the airfield of the 43rd Naval Air Base in Gdynia-Babice Doły. The pilot major, who was serving as a deputy of the aviation squadron, died on the spot, having made no attempt to eject himself out of the plane. At the controls of the aircraft was Pilot Major Robert Killer-Jeł. This is the first such incident involving a Bielik aircraft. These are new airframes that have been introduced to the Polish Army's equipment for several years. This is another fatal accident involving a soldier. In March alone, 5 servicemen were killed, 2 soldiers during NATO's brilliant Jump 24 maneuvers after a tracked vehicle ran into them, 2 more in late March after an explosion at the training ground in Solarnia. A day later, a soldier was killed during a Special Forces mountain training exercise. In April, a diver from the Grom military unit failed to swim out during a military exercise in Gdańsk. Donald Tusk does not get the army. He doesn't even get the police. He seems to be comfortable with the services, I think. As former Deputy Defense Minister Marcin Ociepa points out, on the one hand, this is an accident, but on the other hand, such tragic events are often the result of systemic errors. Each of these cases is individual, and there are cases that are due to the negligence of the Polish Ministry of Defense, and there are cases that are just random accidents. What is the case with this Bielik plane in Gdynia? We will see. On the other hand, we certainly have a government that does not understand the military, that never pays due attention to our security. This begs the question, is the government incapable of managing the defense ministry properly, and therefore incapable of taking care of the security of citizens? Marcin Bakalarski, TV Republika. Peka Cargo is the largest rail freight carrier in Poland. Earlier this month, the carrier announced its intention to carry out group layoffs, which will include up to 30% of its workforce. Acting CEO Marcin Wojewódka assures that there are no plans to liquidate, bankrupt, or close Peka Cargo, but says the company has found itself in a swamp. Trade unionists have a different view of the situation, and according to them, there has been a winding down of Peka Cargo. This is a serious matter. Several thousand jobs are at stake. People are getting reduced salaries. They are tired, scared, and protesting. They are fed up because for several months they have been coming to work with the fear in the back of their minds that today they will be fired. Who will benefit from the possible liquidation of Peka Cargo? Will Peka Cargo be liquidated? Such are the concerns of the company's employees. They have accessed the plans for layoffs and during a meeting with management asked straightforwardly who determines how many people and at which plants will they lose their jobs and on what basis. As a reward for being the leading company, we were given a 37% layoff of employees. This is about Peka Cargo's eastern plant. From the recording of the conversation we accessed, it appears that Marcin Wojewódka, acting CEO of Peka Cargo, does not deny that such plans exist. He also threatens employees that management will not tolerate protests. It seems that the state wants all of you to lose your jobs. To be clear, if necessary, we will close the entire plant. Marcin Wojewódka also dashes workers' hopes for help from Donald Tusk's government. Mr. Chairman, we are counting on the current government. You know what? Count on yourself, not on the current government. From the plans we have accessed, it appears that more than 4,000 Peka Cargo employees will soon have to count on themselves. That's how many people, according to the company's authorities' plans, are expected to lose their jobs in the near future. Laying off more than 4,000 people nationwide, this is a tragedy for thousands of railroad families, and it is simply destroying the company and giving the market to the Germans' Ukrainian railroads. Peka Cargo is the largest rail freight carrier in Poland. As a group, it offers logistics services, combining rail, truck, and sea transportation. The company is also priceless for strategic reasons, especially in the face of the Russian threat. For me, it is unthinkable. After all, we are the national carrier, and we are in charge of serving our military. It is all about security, after all. Foreign companies will be going with depots of, I don't know, with tanks and so on. It is unthinkable. In 2023, Peka Cargo made more than 80 million zloty in profit. A year earlier, almost 150 million zloty. In the first quarter of this year, the group had a loss of 118 million zloty. Konrad Wąż, TV Republika. That's all for the news tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.